Before Tinder scams, sugar baby scandals, and true crime podcasts with moody piano intros, there was Buda Godman, the convent-trained heartbreaker who could outcharm a preacher and outcon a conman. She wasn't just a femme fatale, she was a walking indictment in a feathered hat. Armed with a soft voice, a hard stare, and a habit of disappearing right before sentencing, Buda seduced millionaires, dodged federal agents, and turned the Mann Act into a business model. She broke hearts, skipped bail, and somehow always escaped with the diamonds. And the story. This is the real tale of America's most elegant grifter. From music halls to blackmail rings, hotel raids to Cuban beaches, courtroom loyalty to a taxi full of stolen jewels. And like any good love story, it ends with betrayal, prison, and one hell of a vanishing act. So, buckle up. She's not the heroine, she's the headline. New York, September 1916. In the era of corsets, coal dust, and questionable medical advice, the ever-fashionable Upper West Side of Manhattan played host to a little drama that was equal parts society column and slow-burn scandal. The setting? The Ansonia Hotel at 2109 Broadway, a behemoth of beaux-arts ambition that had just erupted from the city's skyline like a decadent pastry stuffed with European grandeur and the lingering aroma of foie gras. Crafted by French architect Paul E. Dubois, the Ansonia was Manhattan's answer to Paris, if Paris had more goats. And yes, this isn't metaphorical. The hotel boasted an actual rooftop farm. Residents enjoyed farm-to-suite service from 500 clucking chickens, waddling ducks, a few goats for artisanal rooftop cheese, and because this was America, a tame bear for ambiance, presumably. Enter Alice Williams, 27, convent fresh, allegedly, and walking into the marble decadence of the Ansonia like a wide-eyed ingenue, auditioning for the role of naive in a silent film. Spoiler alert, she knew exactly what she was doing. Her arm candy for the evening? Edward West, a Chicago widower, millionaire importer of tea and coffee, and, as luck would have it, emotionally vulnerable. Think Gatsby, but with more caffeine and fewer metaphors. The pair had met mere days earlier at the Blackstone Hotel in Chicago, another bastion of luxury, old money, and new regrets, where Alice introduced herself as a cloistered soul recently unshackled from nunhood and just dying to experience life, liberty, and the pursuit of men. Edward, still nursing the emotional hangover of widowhood, promptly fell into her lap, somewhere between pity, lust, and a longing for distraction. And what better distraction than whisking his wide-eyed convent girl off to New York, where anonymity was guaranteed, reputations could hide behind monocles, and no one would bat an eye if you strolled past a bear on your way to brunch. Far from the disapproving glances of Chicago society, Edward could indulge in his midlife rom-com fantasy without anyone whispering into their opera glasses. But beneath the velvet upholstery and rooftop petting zoo, this high society rendezvous was already teetering between Edwardian romance and a noir novella. Alice wasn't just unpacking her luggage, she was unpacking motives. And Edward, well, he was about to find out that sometimes the most dangerous animals in a luxury hotel aren't the ones on the roof. The evening had begun with the gentle rustle of silk sheets and flirtation, but it ended with handcuffs, and not the fun kind. Once the gilded door to their Ansonia suite clicked shut, Alice Williams transformed faster than a nun at Mardi Gras. Gone was the bashful convent girl. In her place emerged a woman with entrepreneurial instincts, sharper than the cutlery in the presidential suite. Edward West, the tea and coffee tycoon with a soft spot for sob stories, was all too willing to toast to life, love, and lascivious liberty. The night brimmed with promise, until, like an ill-timed room service order, 4 uninvited guests crashed the party. Cue the hallway drama. 4 men in dark coats stormed down the corridor like Prohibition-era Avengers, halting outside the suite with the subtlety of a vaudeville act. They paused, ears pressed to the door, eavesdropping for sounds of sin, bed springs, moans, or possibly an off-key rendition of Let's Misbehave. They didn't have to wait long. Fists thundered on the door. "Open up in the name of the law!" A phrase that tends to kill the mood faster than cold soup. Inside, all became still. Edward West, channeling the chivalry of a man who absolutely had not just violated federal law, stepped forward to greet the intrusion. Behind him, Alice pulled off her best damsel-in-distress impression. Trembling, hiding, the very picture of shocked virtue. It might have worked better if she hadn't just been negotiating her liberation from the convent via satin sheets and strong cocktails. The quartet of intruders flashed badges, federal agents, the kind who rarely showed up for fun unless your idea of a party includes moral panic and paperwork. They swept into the room and began a thorough search, though, really, their job was already done. The presence of a woman, a man, and a hotel suite was all it took. Because we must remember, this wasn't just any awkward bedroom bust. This was a full-blown violation of the Mann Act, America's prim and proper attempt at legislating morality with all the subtlety of a Victorian grandmother slapping a corset on the Constitution. Passed in 1910, the Mann Act made it a federal crime to transport a woman across state lines for prostitution, debauchery, or any other immoral purpose. A legal phrase so vague it could criminalize a road trip with Marvin Gaye on the radio. Branded as a weapon against white slavery, the law had become a blunt instrument of sexual paranoia, wielded with great flair against anyone whose travel plans involved both a train ticket and a bed. In this case, Edward and Alice had apparently committed the ultimate offense, mixing romance with transportation. So there they stood, surrounded by federal agents in a room that reeked of guilt and Guerlain perfume, waiting to be processed, not for passion but for paperwork. Forget rooftop goats and tame bears. The real wild animals were the ones enforcing decency with a legal sledgehammer. The men in the hall weren't just wearing badges, they were brandishing an arrest warrant like it was a party invitation. "We know everything, Mr. West," one of the faux feds declared, with the righteous smugness of a man about to ruin someone's evening plans. "Bringing this young woman from Chicago to New York amounts to crossing a state line, and it's a federal crime." Edward West was told to get dressed. As for Alice, dear, trembling Alice, the former convent girl went full operatic soprano. Her hysterics echoed off the French-inspired walls of the Ansonia suite. She wept, pleaded, and dropped enough Victorian melodrama to earn a guest role in Downton Abbey. If she were arrested unmarried in a hotel room with a man, gasp, her parents would cast her out, her virtue would vanish like prohibition liquor, and her future would be more doomed than a Titanic sequel. Now, federal agents are trained in the art of interrogation, but apparently not immune to a sob story in a low-cut dress. The tone shifted from law enforcement to negotiation with the speed of a Wall Street stock dip. The solution? Pragmatism. Because nothing says justice like a discreet price tag. $15,000, a sum that today would buy you a modest bathroom renovation, or in 1916 a small country. For West, a millionaire, it was a drop in his morally conflicted coffee pot. The deal was simple: cash for silence. The 4 agents took the money, the warrant disappeared faster than Alice's convent backstory, and the couple was left to enjoy their evening, though the mood was presumably less romantic and more existential crisis. But Edward West found himself racked with guilt. Bribing federal agents? It was enough to make a tea mogul's leaves wilt. So, back in Chicago, he marched into the office of Chief Inspector William C. Dannenberg to cleanse his soul and spill the beans, unaware that he'd soon be served a hot cup of irony. Dannenberg, who probably had better things to do than debrief rich men with scandal hangovers, flipped through his files and found nothing. No raid, no agents, no arrest. Not even a note scribbled on the back of a napkin. As far as the NYPD was concerned, the whole event had been an elaborate bedtime story, and one that came with a $15,000 invoice. Worse still, Dannenberg vouched for his agents. None, he insisted, would ever stoop to shaking down a widowed tea baron mid-tryst. That level of corruption was strictly reserved for politics. The truth, as it turned out, was sharper than a nun's ruler. Alice Williams was no convent escapee. She wasn't even Alice. Her real name was Helen Julia Buda Godman, a woman so skilled in the fine art of honey traps and high society cons that she'd earned the tabloid-approved moniker, the $1 Million Bait. She wasn't here to find love or absolution. She was here to fleece emotionally vulnerable millionaires with the precision of a Swiss watch. She was the jewel of a well-oiled blackmail syndicate, a scam artist with a sultry sob story and a Rolodex of fake agents ready to arrest your morals into submission. Poor Edward West had walked into a suite, fallen for a smile, and walked out $15,000 lighter, his reputation shredded not by scandal, but by gullibility. Born in Chicago on December 4th, 1888, Helen Julia Buda Godman arrived into the world with a face for the silver screen and a mind wired for mischief, perhaps inherited from her father, a telegraph operator who apparently loved two things: long-distance communication and losing money on horses. He reportedly found his daughter's beauty and cunning to be even more volatile than a three-legged thoroughbred on race day. Spotting early signs of either genius or chaos, the Godmans placed their bets on education and shipped Buda off to the Catholic St. Joseph's Academy in Adrian, Michigan, a place where young ladies were taught piety, patience, and how to properly extinguish any flickers of personality. Unsurprisingly, Buda was about as suited to convent life as a cigarette in a powder keg. By 18, she'd decided rosaries and rigid routines were less her style than love and vaudeville. So, on November 4th, 1907, she skipped the nun thing and married a man whose name rang bells in every music hall in the Midwest. Tell Taylor, the velvet-voiced crooner behind the early 20th century earworm, Down by the Old Mill Stream. The song was an emotional powerhouse that sold over 4 million copies, a 1900s version of going viral, minus the TikTok dances. Tell and Buda's origin story was romantic enough to make silent film actresses blush. They met 2 years prior when Tell was invited to perform at her school, a rare treat for the cloistered girls and a hormonal earthquake for Buda. Star-struck and smitten, she fixated on the singer with the kind of passion usually reserved for saints or chocolate. After graduation and parole from the nunnery, fate stepped in, or possibly vaudeville marketing. She spotted Tell on stage at a Chicago theater, and in a move equal parts desperate and daring, scribbled a breathless note on a scrap from her handbag and had it hand-delivered to his dressing room. Whether it was destiny, hormones, or simply good timing, Tell remembered her. They didn't bother with the slow burn. Vows were exchanged at a speed that would alarm even Vegas. But, alas, life isn't a love song, and Down by the Old Mill Stream soon became Downhill by the Divorce Court. Less than 3 years into matrimonial madness in 1910, Tell Taylor filed for divorce. And not quietly either. His parting shot to the press landed with all the subtlety of a cymbal crash. I married Buda when we were both drunk, and I discovered she was completely incapable of loyalty to anyone. Ah, the romance. It seems the musical genius had confused infatuation with compatibility, and discovered too late that Buda wasn't just difficult to domesticate, she made house cats look loyal by comparison. Thus ended her brief foray into respectable marriage, and began her true calling: con artistry, blackmail, and outwitting men with more money than common sense. Because while Tell Taylor could write a love song, Buda Godman was already composing a symphony of seduction, scandal, and fraud. And believe me, her greatest hits were yet to come. It turns out that after marrying Tell Taylor, Buda Godman didn't just fall in love with the man, She fell head over heels for the spotlight. Through him, she developed a taste for the glitz of the music hall scene. Sequins, stage lights, and a surplus of actors who were very happy to see her whenever her husband went on tour. Strangely, this open-door policy in the dressing room did not sit well with Mr. Taylor, who had expected marital fidelity instead of a flirtation free-for-all. But Buda, ever the unbothered icon of chaotic charm, bore no grudges. When her marriage inevitably dissolved in a frothy mix of infidelity and public statements, she simply changed scenes and genres. Exit stage left, the wholesome crooner. Enter stage right, James Christian, an artist of another sort who didn't dabble in music but in high-stakes manipulation. His canvas, America's elite. His medium, blackmail. His muse, Buda Godman. By 1916, Christian was the headline act in a coast-to-coast criminal revue. His gang had raked in a cool $1 million, a sum that back then could buy you several mansions, a few senators, and probably an entire state if you played your cards right. Christian wasn't just a conman, he was the Mann Act's unofficial remix artist. While lawmakers intended the 1910 law to protect women from being trafficked for immoral purposes, Christian flipped the script and turned it into a federal blackmail bonanza. The premise was painfully simple and delightfully profitable. Identify a wealthy man with a wandering eye and an even more mobile wallet. Introduce him to a stunning, seemingly vulnerable young woman. Cue Buda in full damsel mode. Let nature, chemistry, and ego take their course. Once the target crossed a state line in pursuit of love, or more likely lust, the trap would spring faster than you can say moral panic. But Christian didn't want just any pretty face. He wasn't casting a chorus girl. He was staging a high-stakes psychological heist. He needed a bait who could play the emotional piano with finesse, fragile enough to make a man feel like her savior, seductive enough to make him forget his wife, and clever enough to keep her act straight even as the fake federal agents burst through the door. Enter Buda, the ultimate femme fatale with a flair for theater and a heart as soft as litigation. She didn't just lure men, she performed them into submission. A winning smile wouldn't cut it. She had to offer a hint of the unforgettable, a suggestion of whispered secrets, perfumed surrender, and just enough vulnerability to make a powerful man feel powerful. Right before he was stripped of his dignity, wallet, and plausible deniability. And when the trap was sprung and the trembling ingenue begged for salvation from social ruin, the victim often paid up, not to save himself, but to save her. The irony? The one who most needed saving was already in on the scam. Armed with a convent education, impeccable manners, and the kind of diction that made high society men sit up straighter and occasionally forget they were married, Buda Godman wielded her upbringing like a holy relic in a den of sin. Unlike most femme fatales, she didn't need a plunging neckline or a cigarette holder to hypnotize her targets. Her deadliest weapon? Polite conversation. While most women in early 20th century Chicago were either navigating corsets or trying not to end up in a brothel directory, Buda was carving out her own niche in the art of seduction through subtext. And she wasn't doing it in alleys or parlors. No, Buda was haunting the plush lounges and crystal-lit bars of the city's finest hotels, where the whiskey was older than the women and the men imagined they still had hairlines. Chicago at the time was less city of big shoulders and more modern Babylon, a cocktail of opulence, organized crime, and silk-clad debauchery where prostitution and wealth mingled freely, often in the back rooms of cigar clubs. And yet, it was precisely in this morally flexible metropolis that Buda perfected her most devastating act, the reverse siren. She didn't purr or promise. She recoiled, she refused. She clutched her pearls so hard they nearly cracked. She acted offended at the very idea of impropriety, because nothing makes a powerful man want you more than being told he can't have you. Especially not here, not now, not in public. Men who approached her expecting sultry compliance were instead treated to a masterclass in well-mannered rejection. And that, reader, was the bait. When she finally softened, allowed a little laughter, a lingering glance, a suggestion of intrigue, it hit them like Cupid with a blackjack. Suddenly, they were cast in the leading role of their own fantasy, no longer bloated bankers or balding industrialists, but dashing heroes in a silent film romance. In her eyes, they were taller, younger, handsomer. A trick of lighting and liquor, perhaps, but effective nonetheless. Then came the final flourish, a whisper, a worry, a well-placed sigh. "Not here," she'd say demurely. "Someone might see us." The suggestion was innocent enough, just a quick getaway to another city, a little privacy, a weekend escape where no one would recognize him or her or the very obvious trap they were walking into. Unlike the famed Everly Sisters, Chicago's queens of high-end prostitution who sold dreams and champagne at $50 a night, Buda Godman dealt in illusions far more lucrative. She didn't sell sex. She sold salvation. A man could buy his fantasy, then pay again to keep it secret. While others were charging for time in bed, Buda charged for silence. After all, in a city where everything had a price, she'd simply chosen a different currency. Who said only brothels could make bank on male desire? For years, Buda Godman had danced through the shadows of the legal system with the grace of a debutante and the moral compass of a pickpocket. No officer had ever managed to pin her down. She was too clever, too poised, and always just one mink coat ahead of the law. But in September 1916, her luck finally stumbled in high heels. Chief Inspector William C. Dannenberg, a man who had likely lost sleep and patience chasing her through smoke-filled hotel bars and falsified identities, finally got his golden goose, albeit one wearing cufflinks. When Edward West, the swindled widower still dripping in guilt and post-bribery shame, nervously recounted his Ansonia hotel ordeal, Dannenberg's ears perked up like a bloodhound catching a whiff of Chanel No. 5 and criminal intent. He didn't need a name. He recognized the symphony of seduction and extortion instantly. This was classic Buda. The sobbing, the baiting, the moral blackmail delivered with a trembling lip and a forged federal badge. It was the signature move of the Queen of the Harassers gang, a criminal cartel headquartered at the Tyson Hotel in South Chicago, which, let's face it, was not exactly subtle for a group of professional blackmailers. At last, Dannenberg had what he needed, a witness with enough money not to be afraid and enough humiliation to talk. The dragnet snapped shut on September 25, 1916, barely days after the Ansonia scam. James Christian, Buda's maestro of manipulation and the gang's Don Juan of white-collar crime, was arrested in New York. Authorities, perhaps not trusting the local charm of the Big Apple to keep him contained, dragged him back to Chicago under heavy guard like a prized turkey before Thanksgiving. But Christian didn't go straight to jail. He went to the Alexandria Hotel, where he was held incommunicado, which is Latin for "your rights are on vacation." No phone calls, no lawyer, no smoke breaks or coded telegrams to Buda. Just a quiet week in a hotel suite with very unfriendly concierge service, as federal agents loomed, ready to turn up the pressure until the blackmail kingpin cracked. Was it legal? Absolutely not. Was it effective? You bet your Mann Act it was. Then, like a curtain falling on the final act of a noir melodrama, Buda Godman made her appearance in New York on November 8th, no longer cloaked in mystery, but flanked by 5 fellow members of the gang, now demoted from accomplices to co-defendants. Before Judge Thomas, with evidence piled higher than her hairdo and no convent tale left to spin, the atmosphere was less courtroom drama and more sentencing ceremony. The prosecution, likely tired of her theatrics and armed with the testimony of a millionaire who just paid $15,000 for the worst vacation ever, applied pressure with the subtlety of a wrecking ball. Buda was advised, strongly, to plead guilty. The evidence was overwhelming, The legal team was circling, and the jig, as they say in the more elegant criminal circles, was extremely up. When the gavel came down and the plea deal was on the table, Buda Godman was faced with the ultimate betrayal clause: testify against her lover or trade her mink for prison stripes. The lover in question? James Christian, her partner in crime, and by all accounts the smooth-talking architect of the gang's blackmail empire. He was no stranger to courtrooms or handcuffs. With a rap sheet longer than a prohibition's speakeasy guest list, James had long since misplaced his legal innocence and was practically on a first-name basis with every penitentiary between the coasts. If convicted again, spoiler, he was, he'd be eligible for parole, sometime after the invention of disco. The judge, channeling the weariness of a man who's seen too many soap operas unfold in his courtroom, reminded Buda that the clock was ticking. Plead guilty, give up the Romeo of racketeering, and maybe, she'd walk away with a lighter sentence. 18 months minimum, he said. Not exactly a romantic sabbatical, but far better than a decades-long engagement to cell block C. But Buda, ever the queen of theatrics, declined the deal with all the conviction of a Shakespearean heroine. She would rather go to prison than betray James. Love, she insisted, was worth the candle, though in this case, the candle was burning at both ends and had been dipped in federal charges. The judge, struck by her loyalty, or perhaps just eager to move on to a less melodramatic docket, released her on a $10,000 bail while she awaited her court appearance the following month. Assuming she was broke, reasonable, given her criminal history revolved around stealing other people's money, he figured she'd stay put. He overlooked one teensy, catastrophic detail. Buda didn't just charm men, she was an equal opportunity enchantress. Enter stage left. Rena Morrow, a woman whose hobbies included courtroom drama and not being convicted for the murder of her husband. Recently acquitted in that minor case of spousal expiration, Rena clearly had both time and sympathy on her hands, and promptly paid Buda's $10,000 bail like it was a bar tab. Meanwhile, in a display of loyalty so misguided it could have been scripted by a Greek tragedy ghostwriter, James Christian pleaded guilty and declared Buda entirely innocent. She was just a helpless pawn, he insisted, a victim of his criminal genius, not a co-conspirator. He believed, like any good doomed romantic, that if they protected each other, the courts would go easy on them, and one day they'd be free to reunite, presumably to scam the honeymoon industry. But James, bless his criminal heart, had misjudged one thing. Buda's loyalty had a return policy. Because the moment she was released, Our Lady Houdini of high-end blackmail vanished like the last martini at a mobster's wake. She skipped bail, missed her trial, and ghosted the justice system with the finesse of a woman who knew exactly how to exit stage right. And thus, in a twist worthy of the tabloids, the courtroom romance that was supposed to end in joint leniency ended instead with James behind bars, and Buda gone with the wind and the $10,000. Love may be blind, but apparently so was the judge. While James Christian counted prison bricks and regretted monogamy from a federal cell, Buda Godman, his alleged damsel in distress, was busy applying sunscreen in Havana, sipping rum cocktails under palm trees, and proving that betrayal, like diamonds, is forever. Yes, while her self-sacrificing lover was serving an 18-month sentence in the clink for a crime she helped orchestrate, Buda was luxuriating in Cuba's sun-drenched exile, where the only bars she faced were stocked with top-shelf liquor. In the ultimate twist of criminal romance, she not only evaded American justice, but also ghosted the man who took the fall for her. A love story for the ages, if the age in question is the age of sociopathy. Her sun-kissed escape was the living embodiment of the classic fable. The hunter becomes the hunted, except in this version, the hunter got played, paid, and then betrayed with a wink and a passport stamp. But you can't keep a good grifter down for long, or out of headlines. Buda resurfaced in 1932 like a bad check, now with wrinkles, wiles, and a new scheme. Apparently not content with emotional larceny, she moved on to the sparkling world of actual theft. Her latest performance? A starring role in a $300,000 jewelry store heist in New York, because subtlety had clearly never been her strong suit. This time, though, the curtain came down quickly. Buda, ever allergic to humility, was caught red-handed and diamond-laden in the back of a taxi at the corner of Broadway and 33rd Street. Because nothing says, "I'm not suspicious," like fleeing the scene of a robbery in rush hour with a cab full of stolen bling. The court, unimpressed by her legacy of charm and chicanery, sentenced her to 8 years in prison. And this time, there were no fake feds, sympathetic judges, or friends fresh off murder trials to bail her out. The Great Escape artist had finally been caught in her own web, and not even Rena Morrow's checkbook could save her now. Upon release, Buda did what she did best: reinvent herself. She changed her identity, vanished into the fog of post-depression anonymity, and slipped off the radar like the final puff of a cigarette in a noir film fade-out. No more trials, no more headlines, no more James. Her death, believed to have occurred in 1944, came with no fanfare, no scandal, no trace. Just the quiet exit of a woman who'd made deception a full-time career and romance a side hustle with dental records optional. Buda Godman, convent-educated, courtroom-tested, and morally flexible to the end. She scammed millionaires, outwitted mobsters, seduced the law, and left love letters that read more like ransom notes. She was a walking contradiction in high heels, a siren in silk, and proof that while crime doesn't pay forever, it sure does come with great accessories.